night, I, due to what people have claimed, expected him to walk in disoriented and estranged, even though this had been his boyhood home, and furthermore, the only home he had ever known. It was unknown as to why, among a plethora of questions that begged to be answered, the night that happened to be the anniversary of his death. Unfortunately, his home was now an inn outside of Stuttgart, his parents having sold it just after the war. That did not deter this young man from returning once a year. I lay in my room watching, in the dark, whatever German programs are on, the only light radiating from an old TV from the 1990s. Just after 2 a.m., he walked into the room that was once his bedroom, just like he might have done in life after a long day in the fields. I was here because I believed that I could make contact. I did just that. Below is a translation of the conversation we had. Dieter Metzger, I called out to the figure that now stood 10 feet away from the bed at which I sat with my back against the headboard. As if it took minutes to reach his ears, he finally looked over to where I was. Despite being an apparition, he was utterly frightened to see me in his bedroom. He did not speak. He did, however, walk closer to the bed. What shocked me about his face was his pale blue hue and the missing flesh of the frostbitten nose. The rest of his skin now a thin, half-starved layer. The uniform he wore hung loose on his body. In spite of this, I spoke again. "Do you know what happened to you?" I could see the jolt from the oddity of the question, but he finally answered. "Happened?" "Yes, happened. What happened to you on the Eastern Front?" "You are in my house," he blurted out. "Yes, I am, but it's no longer 1943. I stopped, then added, "Do you even know how you died? Who are you? Where are my mother and father? I will remove you if you do not leave." "They're gone. They died long ago." He was becoming violent, agitated by my presence. He approached me. It was then that I held up an old photograph of my grandmother. He stopped there as if undergoing a complete recall of everything that had happened since he had left this place. He stared at the framed photo without saying a word. "Who is she, Dieter? You knew her, didn't you?" "What is this?" he asked, looking around the room and indicating nothing in particular. "It's your home. At least it was 80 years ago. You died in the service of the Fuhrer. You froze before you starved to death. You and most of the men in your company." It seemed then that he remembered and could no longer argue with the veracity of what I told him. He then reached for any consolation he could find. "But the Rhineland was restored in victory, was it not?" His anxious look made me wonder if the dead could still experience heartbreak. I didn't want to tell him, but he seemed to see it in my look. Just as well. I couldn't tell him, my grandmother having moved to the States and later marrying a Rosenberg, that I was certainly content with the outcome. That what he participated in was a movement that is now viewed by history as repugnant and horrifying. Looking at what remained of his once youthful face, it occurred to me that he most likely had never left this small town until the fateful day when he marched to Russia with many that were convinced that God would protect them and preserve the fatherland. "My troop," he said suddenly, "did they succeed?" From his question, I could tell that he must have been one of the first to fall in the frozen countryside under conditions that killed thousands of Nazi soldiers. As I thought about this, I couldn't bring myself to answer him, and I didn't need to. A look clouded over his frostbitten face. He walked over and took from me the photo of my grandmother taken from the 50s. Everything I fought for. The beauty and pleas of love now smiles for someone else. A lull of silence for the next 5 minutes. Still sitting against the headboard, I remained watching him standing there and holding the picture. I don't understand how this could be in terms of the mechanisms of the spirit world, that is, his ability to hold material objects with immaterial hands, but he then tossed the photo aside. There's nothing left. I could only respond with, "I'm sorry." He then sat on the edge of my bed saying nothing. I felt I had to say something in consolation. Is there any light that you see that you can go to? What was the point? He said aloud, mostly to himself. He then walked back towards the door and disappeared, only to be seen again on the next anniversary, and then the one after that, until who knows when. He would come here like a fresh blanket of snow, forgetful and estranged as ever, his spirit directionless and purposeless as was his life. You have listened to another presentation of The Haunted Scribe. Please excuse my terrible German accent, but please like and subscribe so you can hear more stories in the coming weeks. I thank you, and good night.